They may not be the best Marine chapter, but they are the second best chapter with angels in their name, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Sons of Sanguinius, the Blood Angels, and we're going to go through, like we've done with the other armies, 5 of their units which are in their 10th edition index, 5 datasheets which are well worth considering if you are building a competitive Blood Angel list. Now, as always, this is just 5 datasheets that I would be choosing if I was building a list. It's not in an order of best to worst or anything like that. And I also think it's worth mentioning in this, the Blood Angels actually have a lot of good characters, to be honest. So you could very, very easily just pick 5 different characters to be in this list, but I don't want to do that. I've intentionally tried to just choose a couple so that we can actually see the Blood Angels' unique units a bit as well. So there is just going to be a couple of characters, but you could very easily pick some other ones to replace the ones I've chosen. But without any further ado, let's get started. And we do actually start with a character. One of the oldest and coolest models that was kicking around even when I started the hobby was the now infamous Captain Tycho. And there are 2 versions in the index. There is the older normal version and the newer Black Rage version, which was how he became before he ultimately died, which I believe in the current lore he is now officially dead, but Tycho the Lost is my pick for the number 5 spot. He's a reasonably cheap 90 point cost and has your generic Marine HQ stat line. He's toughness 4, 4 wounds, has a 2-up save. He doesn't have an invuln, which is a shame, but that gets made up to a slight degree by having a 6-up feel no pain to help him survive just a tiny bit longer. He can also only join Death Company Marines, which may sound like a downside, but as we'll see in just a moment, actually isn't a bad thing, and he has a really solid set of rules to go along with him. On the weapon front, he's decent in melee with 6 strength 4, -1 AP, 2 damage attacks, so he can kill off a few Marines in combat, and then he also has a combi weapon, Bloodsong, which is a 24-inch range, 2-shot, strength 4, -1 AP, 2 damage gun, but also has anti-infantry 4+, devastating wounds, and melter 2, so it can do a really good job against infantry, and has some mortal wound output, and within 12 inches it can get up to 4 damage as well to help him take out some tougher elites and even start to damage vehicles. So it's nothing super amazing, but he doesn't have a bad set of weapons in both melee and at range. His rules, however, make him even better. Black Rage is now a generic Death Company rule that lets you reroll hit rolls for attacks, which is really good for him in combat and with his shooting. It does have a drawback though, in that it makes him OC 0 and it makes him unable to fall back from combat unless there's a chaplain nearby. So there are a few negatives, but I would still say just for the rerolls to hit, it's overall a fairly solid buff. He also has the Death Vision of Sanguinius, which is a brilliant rule. It means that when Tycho dies in melee, you roll a d6 and you add 2 to that roll if the killing attacks were made by a unit which contained the enemy warlord, and on a 2 to 3 the enemy unit suffers flat 3 mortal wounds, on a 4 to 5 it's d3 plus 3 mortal wounds, and on a 6+, it's d6 plus 3 mortal wounds. So essentially, if the enemy warlord kills Tycho, on a 4+ on a d6, you can be doing up to 9 mortal wounds back to them, which makes him a really scary prospect for your opponent to charge, because if they kill him, they could well be just killing their warlord thanks to that mortal wound splashback damage. And then on top of that, he also has the Forlorn Hero rule, which grants him and his unit the ability to advance and charge. So they really can get up the board quite quickly and just unleash a load of damage into the enemy by being able to move up their 6 inches and then advance and then still make a charge. So he and the unit he joins, they are just really good at getting up the board, getting into the enemy's face, and then charging in, and even if he does die in return, he can still do a huge amount of damage back to your opponent before he gets removed. So I think for 90 points, he is a really solid boost to the unit he can join, which, as I just mentioned, is the Death Company Marines. And on that note, the next unit in this list is the Death Company Marines. These are not the Death Company Intercessors, which are the Primaris version. These are still your firstborn Death Company, and again, they have that typical Marine stat line of toughness 4, 2 wounds, and a 3-up save. Like Tycho, they do have a 6-up feel no pain to protect them just a little bit more, and also like Tycho, they have the Black Rage rule for those rerolls to hit, as well as the drawback of losing their OC when they're away from a chaplain. But on top of that, they also have the rather tasty rule in an honourable death in combat, which gives the unit sustained hits 1 if they are below starting strength, or sustained hits 2 if they are below half strength. So in a squad of 10, when you drop to 4 models remaining, you are getting sustained hits 2 on their attacks. And of course, if Tycho is in the squad, he will be getting that buff too, which is a really nice boost to his damage output. Of course, there's always the downside in that to get this buff you need to be losing models, and to get the sustained hits 2 version you need to be under half strength, so your squad is going to be weaker, but it's a nice buff in terms of making the squad stay relevant and stay maybe not more deadly, but stay almost as deadly as they were before. Even as the opponent starts to whittle down your squad, they can just keep on trucking and still do a good amount of damage output right until the last member of the squad dies. But I think where the Death Company Marines really shine is their cost is actually a bit pricey. They are 26 points per model, so a full squad of 10 is costing you 260 points. But their war gear options are ridiculously good. They allow any of the squad to swap their chainsword for a power fist, or swap their bolt gun and close combat weapon for a thunderhammer. So you can potentially have a full squad of 10 of these guys all swinging thunderhammers, which equates to 30 strength 8 minus 2 AP, 2 damage attacks with devastating wounds, and re-rolling your hit rolls thanks to the Black Rage. So with Tycho's advance and charge, they can get into combat really quickly, and they can just do a huge amount of damage, and even as they start to lose models, they will be getting more attacks thanks to those sustained hits. And I would argue that if you lose 1 or 2 models, so you're losing 3 or 6 attacks, you're probably going to be better off because you now have 7 or 8 or 9 models that have got sustained hits 1 on their power fists or thunderhammers. And just as a quick example, if you charge them in against an Oath of Moment target, the Blood Angel Red Thirst rule, which is their detachment rule, gives you +1 strength and +1 attack. So this squad, if they charge into an enemy Oath of Moment target, will have 40 strength 9 attacks with their thunderhammers, and they will easily one-shot something like a knight, or do something in the region of 18 mortal wounds alone to things like infantry squads, so they can just utterly annihilate vehicles, monsters, elites, hordes, pretty much anything in the game they can just wipe out on the charge. And yes, they are a bit pricey, 10 guys and Tycho is 350 points, but they will very easily one-shot even 450 point knights with ridiculous ease if you can get them into combat. In the third spot in this list we have another non-character, but this time we do actually have a vehicle, the Death Company Dreadnought, and you may be able to tell a lot of the good stuff in the Blood Angel Index is their Death Company bits. This guy is toughness 9 with 8 wounds, and he has a 2-up save, a solid 8-inch move, as well as that 6-up Feel No Pain to just help him keep on going a little bit longer over the course of the game. He is a fairly hefty 195 points, so yes, he isn't exactly cheap, but he is an absolute terror in melee. He has the Black Rage again, so he is re-rolling hit rolls and drops to OC 0 if there's no chaplain nearby, but with his melee weapons of either the Twin Furioso Fists, which are 5 attacks at strength 12, minus 3 AP, 3 damage and twin linked, or the option of Blood Talons, which brings 7 attacks at strength 8, minus 2 AP and 3 damage, again being twin linked, he can basically be getting that Oath of Moment benefit against anything he goes up against, even if it isn't your Oath of Moment target. And on the charge, thanks to the Blood Angel rules, he will be wounding things like knights on 3s with his fists, and even most tanks and vehicles on 4s rather than 5s with the Blood Talons, thanks to that +1 strength on the charge. He does also have some ranged output too with the Melter Gun and the Storm Bolter that he has, but his main war gear upgrade really is the Magna Grapple he can take, which grants him +2 to his charge rolls if you are charging a vehicle or a monster. So he can move up that relatively nice 8 inches and then get a 2d6 +2-inch charge against vehicles, so he can get into combat really quite quickly. And then when he does get into combat, he gets even more terrifying. His special rule, Frenzied Reprisal, means that when an enemy unit targets him, after they've finished attacking, he can shoot or fight back. This doesn't state it only works if he hasn't fought this phase either, so he can charge into an enemy vehicle, do all of his attacks, and then after the enemy has hit back, he can then attack again. So he can potentially have anywhere between 12 and 16 attacks on the charge, depending on his weapon loadout, which will be rerolling hits and rerolling wounds, so he can just wipe out pretty much anything when he gets into combat. And again, to use the example of a knight, specifically something like a Knight Crusader, which only has the Titanic feat for its melee output, he can charge in and he'll do round about 12 wounds with his Furioso fists, and then he will probably survive the attacks back because the Titanic feat aren't that amazing, so he can charge in, do his attacks, survive the Knight Crusader hitting him back, and then he can swing again, and he will, on average, kill a Knight Crusader in one round of combat. He does just over 23 damage thanks to his rerolls, so he is really solid at going into enemy vehicles and monsters and units that maybe aren't that great in melee or have low enough strength that they can't really kill him in one go, so he can just charge into infantry squads, even things like hordes of orc boys, but land raiders, repulsors, baneblades, all those really big shooty tanks will just get absolutely wrecked by him because he can charge in, survive their attacks back, and then just fight again. So in 1 or 2 rounds of combat, he can essentially be attacking up to 4 times into a big vehicle, and he will just wipe out anything that he gets into until he eventually does die. In the 4th spot, we move from one Dreadnought to another Dreadnought actually. The slightly cheaper Blood Angel specific Librarian Dreadnought is another very solid choice for 10th edition. It's 185 points, so it's slightly cheaper. You get the same toughness 9, 8 wounds and 2 up save, but the Librarian Dreadnought doesn't have the 6 up Feel No Pain and is only a 6-inch move rather than 8, so there are a few downgrades there. But of course the main draw of this thing is that it is, funnily enough, a Psyker and has some very cool abilities that go alongside that. On the shooting front, from a psychic perspective, it can fire the Blood Lance, which is either a strength 10 minus 3 AP d6 damage shot at 18 inches with sustained hits d3, or you can focus it and it does gain hazardous, but it's now strength 12 minus 3 AP and is now d6 plus 3 damage. It's still only one shot, but with sustained hits d3, you can potentially be getting 4 strength 12 hits into an enemy, which is quite spicy if rather rare. And then at d6 plus 3 damage, it can do a fair bit of work into enemy vehicles too. Unlike the twin linked fists of the Death Company Dreadnought, he just has one Furioso fist. It's still strength 12 minus 3 AP and 3 damage, but it's not twin linked, so that's another slight downgrade from the Death Company Dreadnought. But he does also have a Force Halberd for 1 extra attack, which is strength 9 minus 3 AP and d6 plus 3 damage. I would say in general the twin linked fists are probably a bit better overall, but still an extra d6 plus 3 damage attack could help you punch through something like a Rhino, and being strength 10 on the charge, because it's strength 9 base, means you're going to be wounding things like Rhinos on 3s, which is fairly nice. And then of course he also brings some very nice buffs thanks to being a Psyker. The Shield of Sanguinius is a lovely 6-inch aura which grants a 5-up Feel No Pain against psychic attacks and mortal wounds, so he does have some good defense against those, and of course gives it to any squad that's near him, and he will be surprisingly durable against enemy Psykers or any enemy mortal wound output from things like devastating wounds. And then he has the spell Wings of Sanguinius, which allows him to, at the end of the movement phase, choose an infantry unit within 12 inches and you roll a d6. On a 1 you suffer d3 mortal wounds, but on a 2+ you can move that infantry unit and set it back up again anywhere on the battlefield 9 inches from an enemy. So this is a really brilliant mobility tool. It can let you set up something like some melter shooting from maybe a squad of eliminators within melter range of an enemy, or you can get onto an objective on the other side of the board with some intercessors, or you can just, disrupt the enemy battle plans by dumping 10 Death Company Marines right in his backfield. It is a really useful, really solid tool to have in your back pocket, and it makes the Librarian Dreadnought a really nice, valuable utility piece that can bring you just that extra bit of board control, so I think it's well worth that 185 point price tag. Finally, in the last spot, we swing back to another character, this time not one of the big ones like Mephiston or Dante. No, this time we are looking at the Sanguinor in all of his golden glory. The Sanguinor is quite pricey, again he's 160 points, but he is just good. He is really good. He's toughness 4, but he has 7 wounds, and he has a 2-up save and 4-up invuln as you would expect. He can deep strike, which is useful. He's got lone operative, which is brilliant, and he has fights first, which is also really fantastic. On the rules front, he allows units within 6 inches of him to reroll battle shock and leadership tests, which is, it's okay I guess, it's nothing amazing, but I would say his other ability is where 90% of his value lies, and is the reason that you will 100% of the time be keeping this guy in reserves. Miraculous Saviour is a rule that you use at the end of your opponent's charge phase after all the charges have been made. So you choose an enemy unit that has made a charge, and then you can set the Sanguinor up in engagement range of them. So yeah, it's a totally free automatic charge essentially into an enemy unit. You don't get the Blood Angels bonuses for charging because you haven't charged, but you essentially get this guy automatically into combat with an enemy unit that's charged. And of course, the Sanguinor has fights first, so he will be swinging before them. It is just the ultimate charge deterrent, and it means your opponent is going to have to be so careful and so cagey about what he charges in where, because he's going to know that the Sanguinor can just appear anywhere that you want him to ruin whichever combat you want to kind of mess up. On the damage front, he's not too shabby. He's got 8 attacks, he hits on 2s, and his weapon is strength 6, -3 AP, 2 damage with devastating wounds. So I mean, he's not great into monsters or vehicles, and if your opponent charges a knight in, you probably don't want to chuck this guy into that combat. But if something like an enemy marine squad charges in, or a squad of orc boys, or some Tyranid warriors, or harlequins, or even custodian guard, he can just pop up right next to them and absolutely go to town on them before they can even swing. He's not going to, auto-delete a squad or anything, but if they are maybe the Oath of Moment target, or they're just sort of a Marine toughness 4 2 wound profile, he will do a genuinely solid amount of damage to them, and he will massively lessen the amount of damage that they can do to your squad that they've charged. So it's just the sheer threat that he has of being able to appear next to any of your enemy's charging units and just swing into them before they get to go. It really is a huge, influential psychological play, I think, and it just makes him so valuable in my opinion for that. And then even when your opponent does get to swing, he is plenty durable. He's got 7 wounds and a 2-up save, a 4-up invuln, so he can probably survive a good bit of damage into him as long as you chuck him into the right enemy target. And he's got a hefty 12-inch move as well, so he can very easily move into other combats after that one in subsequent turns in the game and just keep on messing up enemy infantry in following turns thanks to fight first and his 8 attacks. So I mean, yes, he is a bit pricey, but I think he brings a huge amount of value, and I really do think that at that price tag he is worth taking almost just for that rule alone. So that is the Blood Angels. As I said, they do have a few other characters I could have put in. I think Mephiston is good, I think Dante is good. They do have some really solid characters to bring to the game. They also do have a few duds. Sanguinary Guard and Death Company with jump packs just don't seem very point efficient at the moment at all. But as always, I'd really love to know what your favourite Blood Angel units are in 10th edition and what you would have included if you were doing this list yourself. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later guys.